Through his many years of strong leadership, our next speaker has impacted local, state, and national agriculture. Philip Nelson is the 14th president of the Illinois Farm Bureau and serves as full-time executive officer. He is president of the companies that make up Country Financial, Illinois Agricultural Service Company, and the IAA Foundation. He also serves on the coordinating committee of Growmark Incorporated, a Farm Bureau for 4 years. He was elected to the American Farm Bureau Federation Board in 2004 and served as chair of the American Farm Bureau Federation Board in 2004 and served as chair of the AFBF Trade Advisory Committee for 2 years. Philip and his wife Carmen operate a fourth-generation grain and livestock farm near Seneca. Please give a warm welcome to Philip Nelson.
Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here, and before I go any further, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you and your organization, because on behalf of Illinois Farm Bureau, we have a very good working relationship. Dwayne Nolan's roots go back to Farm Bureau, and I just want to say publicly on behalf of our organization, we appreciate everything that you do. And you know, with Dwayne, you never know what to expect when you're in a meeting, and I think he represents you well. But I will tell you, for some of you who don't know me, I come from the northern part of the state, as it said in the introduction. Matter of fact, I live 9 miles north of Seneca, 9 miles south of Newark, 3 miles east of Danway, and 1¼ miles west of the old Nettle Creek store. And for those of you who know where that is Norwegian country. As a matter of fact, up there, 95% of us are Norwegians. The other 5% dearly wish that they were. But located about 3 miles from where I live is the oldest Norwegian Lutheran church in all of North America, Fox River Lutheran, 170 plus years and counting. We have a very motivational, inspirational pastor, and about every Sunday, people get motivated about halfway through his sermons. A couple weeks ago, no different. Pastor Garner's halfway through his sermon, people leaning forward in the pews, ready to grasp the next word that he was about ready to say. All at once, a lovely young lady in the front row of the balcony leaned a little bit too far forward, and she fell. Her feet caught the edge of the balcony, her dress draped down over her head. Pastor Garner had saw what had happened, interrupted his sermon. He said, if anyone should turn around and see that lovely young lady hanging from the balcony with her undergarments, ye shall be struck blind. Well, 2 Norwegian brothers sitting about halfway up in the pews that day, one nudged the other and said, Ole, I don't know about you, but I'm willing to risk one eye. Well, I'm not here to tell you about the risks that we take in this business of agriculture. But Dwayne asked me if I would talk about some of the issues that impact rural Illinois, rural America, and what we do in the Illinois Farm Bureau is a part of that. And I want to start out by saying agriculture is really the economic engine of this state and this country. Right here in Illinois, about 40% of our economy goes back to agriculture. Matter of fact, almost 1 million people have a touch point in agriculture in their jobs. So no matter what we do as an organization, we have a number of people that are a part of what we do. So I'd like to focus on 4 areas that Illinois Farm Bureau is working on that really does have an impact on the rural areas across this state. First and foremost, most of you know that Illinois Farm Bureau is very involved in the legislative circles, whether it's in Springfield or Washington, D.C. And probably you've been given an update by now. The state of our state is in a state of confusion. And when you look at the challenges that we are facing in Illinois, they are paramount to everything that we do in agriculture and a business climate. The statistics sum those up quite well. We're spending about $17 million a day for our debt load, $100 billion of unfunded pension liability, and at the same time we have about $6 billion of unpaid bills in the drawers that are not being paid to various institutions and such around the state. And whether you support Senator Cullerton's plan or Speaker Madigan's plan, The thought that I leave you with today is we've got to get our arms around this because it's taking down our economy, our industry, and everything that we do. We've got to urge this General Assembly to get the pension problem solved. And as we go forward, it will have ripple effects on everything else that we do in this state. But shifting gears to the national level, we have a whole host of issues that we're working on there. 2 weeks ago, I happened to be in our nation's capital as we were debating the Farm Bill. And for those of you who have watched the Farm Bill debate, I'll sum it up quite simple. The Senate passed their version of the Farm Bill. The House tried to pass their version of the Farm Bill. It failed. They decoupled the Food and Nutrition Program away from the commodity title, and then the House passed the commodity title, and now where we're at is waiting for the House to put together conferees to try to reconcile the differences. Everybody follow that? Yeah. It is a challenge when you look at a farm bill today, when 80% of that farm bill is actually food and nutrition programs. So we in agriculture feel it very important you've got to keep the two hooked together, especially if you look long term. If we're going to have future farm bills, to have that voting block to make sure that we can pass those farm bills in the future. The second issue that we're working on at the national level is immigration reform. And some of you might question, why are we embedded in that debate? Quite simply put, if we look at the impact to rural economies, and you look at, as we grow our industry, we've got to have an adequate supply of labor. We hear about the experiences in California where they're not able to secure a workforce to harvest their crops. We're hearing about it in Illinois as we look to livestock operations, that people don't apply for jobs to try to milk cows or raise hogs. So it is very important that we try to address this very important issue. The Senate passed a comprehensive overhaul of the immigration reform. But again, it is stalled in the House, and it looks like we're going to piecemeal that together as we try to at least get them to take the ag jobs portion up. The third issue that we're working on deals with something that impacts every one of you in this room, and it's infrastructure. Whether it's the roads, the bridges, or the waterways, more specifically, the Waterway Resource Development Act. We are in dire need of improving our infrastructure on the inland waterway system. 70 to 80 years old right now. And if one of those repair gates breaks, or we have a hiccup in that system, it will literally shut down our mode of transportation on the water. It is imperative that Congress acts on this for that reason only. But another reason, as we watch the Panama Canal be upgraded, we only have 6 ports in this country today that can accommodate those huge Panamax vessels. So it is imperative, again, Congress needs to act on this very important issue. And the last issue that we're working on at the federal level is tax reform. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Dave Camp, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and Max Baucus from the Senate Ways and Means Committee. They are going to put together major tax reform, hopefully in this session of Congress. And they have said and challenged us, if we start with a blank white sheet of paper, what does agriculture need or want as we develop tax reform in this country? And quite simply put, we put our wish list together. Section 179, the expensing option that many of you in this room utilize, is important that we make that permanent. We saw what happened in the fiscal cliff where we ran up against the 12th hour and then they put it back in play. We need to look at that in agriculture from a cash accounting basis as we look to the future, let alone probably addressing the estate tax again if that gets put back on the table. Those are just a few of the legislative activities that Illinois Farm Bureau works on that do have an impact on rural Illinois. But also, we look at other aspects of our industry. And one that affects you in the rural electric business is the growing of livestock operations in Illinois, an economic driver in this state. Last year alone, $2 billion of receipts were attributable to animals that basically were raised in this state. It's a huge situation where we're trying to grow that industry, And sometimes we run into problems in rural settings as it relates to setbacks, families getting involved against other families as we try to site these livestock operations. We have one of the best Livestock Management Facilities Act in the country, bar none, right here in Illinois. It makes producers act responsibly with setbacks, nutrient management plans in place. And if we are going to grow our industry long term, we have to rely on livestock. Almost a third of the corn and soybeans that we raise in this state go through four-legged critters of one way, shape, or form. 25,000 jobs go back to animal agriculture. Another 125,000 jobs are involved in the processing of those livestock right here in Illinois. So you can see the major activity that takes place as it regards livestock situations. But the third area that we've been working on in Illinois Farm Bureau is called the Vision for Illinois Agriculture. 5 years ago, myself, Bob Easter, and Chuck Harkey sat down and we said, what do we want Illinois agriculture to look like 5, 10, 20 years from now? And what do we have to do to make that happen? So, as a result of initial meetings and bringing people from academia and commodity organizations to the table, we set 3 goals. We said we want to see Illinois to be in the top 3 as it relates to production agriculture. Currently, we rank 5th. We'd like to see Illinois in the top 3 in food manufacturing and processing. Today, we rank 4th. And we have to recognize the food manufacturing corridors that we have in this state and the impact that those food manufacturing corridors have from Chicago to downstate Illinois. It is a huge economic driver. And the third goal that we had as a part of that vision was we said we wanted to be the leader in bio-based outcomes. That's everything from ethanol plants to biodiesel plants to wind generation in this state. And we think we are on the road to trying to make that happen. But having said all of that, we put together a SMART agenda to say, how do we make that happen? One of the key drivers in trying to move our industry forward, infrastructure. And you look at that and you look at jobs that can be created as a result of agriculture. But even bigger than that deals with business climate. We found out 5 years ago that in this state, in order to site a business in Illinois, it took roughly 500 days. That means going from agency to agency for applications and permitting. We found out that Iowa took 140 days. We found out that Indiana was at 125. And one of the first things that we accomplished as a vision project was to get that number from 500 down in that 125 to 130 days. We accomplished that. But it's little things like that that we have to continue to work on if we're going to move our industry and organization forward. Last but not least, an issue that we have found in our organization and our industry is we've got to do a better job of telling our story. Last year, 12,000 teachers in this state were a part of training for Ag in the Classroom. Illinois can be proud of the fact we have the premier Ag in the Classroom program in this country, bar none. We teach 3rd and 4th graders across this state about agriculture. Sometimes we get so busy and embedded into our farming operations that we forget about telling people what we're doing and how we do it. As a result of that, there's been a disconnect. We see people that have pushed back agriculture, whether it's production agriculture or agricultural processing. So we have a big story to tell about what we think is the #1 industry in this state and this country. Even further than that, 2 years ago, we started a project called the Chicago Field Moms, where we are selecting Chicago consumers, moms, that basically go through a training process of bringing them out to our farms and showing them firsthand what we're doing and how we do it. It's been amazing to see those field moms and their response to seeing production agriculture firsthand. We hear stories that are unbelievable when they can't fathom the fact that they thought that they were getting a better product by buying organic milk and finding out that really they were paying 3 times as much of what they needed to for milk alone. And that's just one example of trying to get that message across to those people. And those moms are blogging and twittering and tweeting and using social media to tell that story for us. As you can see, we have a number of issues that we're working on in production agriculture. And most of those come right back to our rural communities, our rural organizations that really are the strength and the backbone of what we do and how we do it. And sometimes I'm amazed when we think about the challenges that lie before us. And I'm reminded just a year ago when I had the opportunity to travel to Colombia as part of the implementation phase of the Panama, Colombia, and Korea Free Trade Agreement. The last day of our trip, we were outside of Bogota, and our ambassador said, "Philip, you want to go see a common farm outside of Bogota?" I said, "Sure." So we hopped in his Jeep and drove down a dirt road that seemed like it was, 70 miles, and I think it was 20 miles. And we happened to come across this farmer just outside of Bogota who grew palm oil. So we went through his plantation, and by Illinois standards, it was about 80 acres. And he showed us how he harvested those palm oil trees with water buffaloes. He didn't have electricity out in that remote area. And we went into his house, which consisted of a dirt floor and just a wood table that was cut from a tree. And we sat down, and he started to tell us about his farming operation that he had. And he told us how he was growing it and how he had hoped that his son would someday come back and help him grow that operation. But it dawned on me as he started talking about American agriculture and what he had read and what he had seen and heard about what we do back here in the States, about how fortunate we really are as I watched him converse with us. We talk about the challenges that we are facing, whether it's the budget deficits at the national level, the budget deficits at the state level. You look at the regulatory challenges that are coming our way, whether it's in the electric business or the farming business. And you look at the challenges that we face from a policy standpoint. And I looked at Carlos, and those problems and those challenges seem fairly minimal compared to the challenges that he goes through on a daily basis. I have no doubt right now, people like Carlos in Bogota, Colombia would change places with any single person in this room in a nanosecond for what we have that surrounds us. You have an organization where you make a difference, whether it's in your organization or the one that I represent. We all need to stand up and be counted and tackle these issues so we can make this state and this country a better place, because everybody pitched in and tried to steer this country and this state in the right direction. We are at that defining moment right now, here in Illinois and in this country, as it relates to all these issues that I'm talking about. And as Abraham Lincoln said 150 plus years ago when he founded the Department of Agriculture, clearly the strength of this country lies in its agriculture. Abraham Lincoln got it right. And now it's up to you and I, as citizens of this state and country, to make sure that people understand the backbone of this country, and it's every single one of you. Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure to be here. Sure. The lights come up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll take a question. How are we servicing or surfacing leaders? I think that's a good question, Dwayne, because right now, we have turnover. We have tenure in our board. I'll be tenuring off as president this December after serving 5 two-year terms. And our board has tenure of the same time period. And one challenge that I think we have in agriculture, and you have it in your organization too, is surfacing people. And you know, we have a leadership academy that we have in Illinois Farm Bureau. We have the ALOT program, the Ag Leaders of Tomorrow, that we continue trying to get people involved. But I think one of our biggest challenges is tapping into the young people that are coming through colleges. We started a collegiate farm bureau last year for the first time at the University of Illinois. We have over 100 members, college students in that particular program. And I think, you know, if you look at what our industry, the opportunities out there, they're huge right now. And we need to get that point across to our colleges, to our high school guidance counselors, that there is a future in agriculture. And I think that ripples through the whole system. But we just witnessed a presentation this week, actually, at Commodities Conference, where a gentleman did an audit of how many boards of directors there are in agriculture. And that would probably be your boards too. You know, if you look at just the amount of people that serve on those boards, it's over 2,000. And if you look at replacing some of those people as they retire or they tenure off, you have to have a fairly good pool of people that are willing to step up to the plate to serve in those positions. So it's something I think all organizations need to have in the back of their mind as they put together succession planning. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned infrastructure support, roads, bridges, waterway. One of the other infrastructure needs in rural Illinois is broadband. How do you see our organization working together to improve on that?
Well, we have worked with the governor. When he was lieutenant governor, this was his #1 priority. And I will tell you, from Springfield south, there is a big hole as it relates to broadband in Illinois. And it's something we have not taken lightly and continue to push that we need to have the resources to make that happen, so you've got the same opportunities in southern Illinois as you have in northern Illinois. And you know, I thought by now we would be further down that pathway, but we have board members in deep southern Illinois on our board. Our District 18, which is Williamson County, is where Jim Anderson's from. He has terrible time pulling up internet access and such. So we have to continue to work on that. And you know, it's a challenge in agriculture too, when you look at all the global positioning that's going on with you know, auto steer technology, guidance systems. If you have those holes and you don't have RTK or some other means of doing it, it disallows farmers from adapting that new technology as well. So it's a huge problem, and I can't, I guess, say it strong enough that if we don't improve our infrastructure, whether it's broadband, improving our roads and bridges, our waterways, we're going to be at a disadvantage to our competitors. If you see what's happening in South America, that's their #1 priority is infrastructure. If you look to China, they spent, when we put our first stimulus package together of $782 billion, China had a stimulus package of the equivalent of $500 billion just for infrastructure, same year. They are now having roads and bridges and railroad systems that are gonna put us at a disadvantage if we don't invest in our infrastructure for long-term growth. It's a big problem. And what's driving it right now is the lack of, I guess, passion on part of Congress of not putting and allocating resources out there to do it. I do think we have a shot at the inland waterway system with our locks, because we're looking at a public-private partnership for the first time, and that puts dollars from the private industry on the table and says, okay, government, you match them, and we'll do this jointly. And we're probably going to have to get creative in the future to do that. Yeah.
How strong a sense do you get in Illinois politics with the urban and the rural? Do you get kind of an us versus them type feeling when you come to the
It probably depends on the issue. We have an Adopt a Legislator program in Farm Bureau that I guess I'll toot our horn a little on, because we have all the urban legislators adopted by downstate counties that bring those people downstate to give them a flavor of what's going on in production agriculture. That has been a huge success for us when we get into various issues. Where you get into that issue that you're talking about is where you have a urban issue that sometimes does divide downstate Illinois. But right now, I just make a comment. We've got fractured politics at the state and at the national level. When I started getting involved in things like this, probably 30 years ago as a young farmer, there was always a willingness to reach across the aisle and come up with a compromise. And it has become so polarized right now. Case in point, on the fractured farm bill, 216 to 208. There wasn't one Democrat that voted for that commodity title only. It was all Republicans. And I heard things when I was out there from the Democrats that said, you know, Philip, we were with this farm bill till they put the 2 poison pills in on the end, and that's why it failed. And those dealt with food and nutrition programs. And, you know, when you get into urban issues that are pocketbook issues, that's where you start to see the gridlock. But as I said earlier, I am very worried if we don't get this pension problem solved. And I have said it publicly, everybody's going to have skin in this game, whether it's the firefighter or the firemen or the police officer or teachers. And we have taken a stand in our organization that we want to be at the table to push the General Assembly to solve it. Because if you don't solve that and you look at that long-range plan, it's going to eat this state alive from doing anything, let alone paying its bills on time. So, I mean, Dwayne, when you were there, we never saw near the gridlock that we're going through today. And it's a concern. The other concern with that is you got to get people to run for those positions, to have that passion to try to make a difference and get it done, like I said before. Other questions? Yeah.
Yes, Phil, Jerry Brooks from Petersburg. You were speaking on the farm program, the farm bill that's coming up for a vote possibly. Would you take a few seconds and look into your crystal ball and talk about what's going to happen in your view with the decoupling of the food and nutrition from the commodity title and how that's all going to play out in September and beyond?
Okay, well, what he's referencing is the Farm Bill extension that we're operating under expires the end of September. So if Congress does nothing, we have another expired Farm Bill. You'll start to see on the major networks $8 a gallon milk, because the milk or the dairy program is the first one up that will really be a pocketbook issue. I sense that the House wants to do something they don't know what to do. And I say that because when they severed and split the bill, we were right up there immersed in with all the discussions, and I said, if you repeal the 1949 Act, that's part of this. It was to split the bill, repeal the 1949 Act, and make 2013 the baseline on the commodity title. We have problems with that because in the past, in order to force Congress to write a farm bill, the 1940 Act has always been looming out there as the hammer to make them do it. Now you remove that, you may not see a farm bill as you know it if this passes. But I guess my speculation would be that I would hope they would get and appoint the conferees to try to reconcile the Senate fully passed farm bill and the commodity title. What the Senate is asking for right now is they want a food and nutrition program for the House to take up when they come back from the August recess, so then you could merge the two together. The big hang-up is the food and nutrition title. And the Senate side, they cut $4 billion, primarily overhead, out of the food and nutrition programs. And if you look back, about 4 years ago, 23 million Americans were on food and nutrition programs. That number now is almost 50 million. That number used to be 25 to 30 billion dollars. That number now is $75 billion. And in the huge difference between the Senate and the House, the Senate cut $4 billion, the House was proposing cutting $20 billion. And that's where the Democrats peeled off. To consolidate that or compromise it, you were probably looking at $8 to $10 billion of cuts. And that's the issue of, are there enough people in the House that can support those types of cuts to get it to conference committee? So I guess the short answer is, I hope we can put enough pressure in the August recess to make them come back and do it. But these other issues are pocketbook issues too, and you've got a debt ceiling debate that now is front and center stage, and we're hearing Speaker Boehner basically saying, you know, we're not going to take the farm bill up until we get the Democrats to compromise on where the debt ceiling is going to be. So now you've been pulled into that debate. Our hope was we were going to get this taken care of, get it to a conference committee before the August recess, and that didn't happen. Any other questions? With that, I appreciate the opportunity, and again, Dwayne, it's a pleasure to work with you, and look forward to working with your organization. Thank you.
Thank you.